So Wizards of the Coast has released an errata to multiple core rulebooks and adventures over the last few days, and honestly, the response has been nothing short of confusing. The errata drama has honestly been wild. There's been a flurry of tweets and Reddit posts and YouTube videos all discussing all these things that have been changed and removed, and how the sort of core of Dungeons and Dragons is now being kind of shifted or removed in some way. The outcry has been so crazy that Ray Winninger actually had to post a clarifier to the errata just to really kind of underscore that they are not doing away with certain aspects of the game like many people are suggesting, but rather they're really just trying to provide a more concrete kind of base level, and to be able to provide a little bit more logic and cohesiveness to the whole multiverse as a whole as it exists within the game. You know, he mentions the idea that orcs from Greyhawk to Eberron have the same kind of suggestions for traits or how they act or the things that they do, or whether they're inherently good or evil or neutral or whatever that balance kind of lies. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So the idea here is that by removing these suggestions from the player's handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide or whatever adventure that you happen to be reading through, it's not to, you know, pull these aspects out of the game, but actually to make players feel a little bit less boxed in, which maybe some new players or DMs might feel like they have to run a certain race or a certain character in a specific way because that's the way that it's written in the book, and they kind of feel beholden to that. The bottom line is that the errata really doesn't actually change all that much, but it really does signify kind of the direction that Wizards is likely to be taking Dungeons & Dragons moving forward into the future, likely kind of getting us a little bit of glimpses of what we're going to see in 2024 with D&D 5.5 or 6th edition or whatever it's called. And from my perspective, the way that I see it, I think that's going to be a game that's much more about interpretation than adjudication. And I think that's actually a really, really good place to be heading. What I mean by that is that the things that they're removing and changing aren't really destroying any sort of core fundamental keystones of what it is to play Dungeons and Dragons or what this game fundamentally is, but really I think it's kind of the opposite. I really do think it's kind of underscoring those pins. Being able to remove these suggestions that might make maybe particularly new players or DMs feel sort of boxed in some way so they don't feel like they're doing something wrong by changing something is honestly a good thing. Making the game feel a little bit more streamlined and easier to manage is honestly a good thing. Overall, I really like the changes that they're making with the errata. It's not some massive sweeping changes that are going to completely wipe out and destroy your concept or your notion of Dungeons and Dragons, but it's really just these small, simple things that I think in the long term are going to make the game better. All right, so now with all the errata drama out of the way, I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about some of the changes that they made and focus a little bit more on the more meaningful ones that might actually have some kind of a mechanical adjustment or change to the game. But before I do that, if you are enjoying my channel and you do like this type of content, please do consider subscribing. It's absolutely free and it helps me in a significant way, and I appreciate absolutely every single one. We're edging very close to that 100 subscriber count. I'm really excited. I love making these types of videos, so please help support me. I really do appreciate it. All right, so we're going to kick it off with the big one that everyone's really talking about, and that is alignment. And I think this is particularly hilarious because for years people have been talking how alignment is antiquated. It's a relic of the past it's a relic of previous versions that, doesn't really have any place in 5th edition. And now the fact that there's even some notion that that the Wizards is pulling away or pulling back on alignment, there's been this incredible outcry about it. And I think the irony kind of speaks for itself on that one. But essentially, they are not getting rid of alignment. They are removing alignment suggestions. So that is really to say that, not all humans tend towards good, or not all orcs tend towards evil. There is some sort of middle ground depending on where they come from and their culture and what kinds of activities they've been involved in. Depending on where they are and their sort of impacts, their nature, that may change the sort of alignment that they tend towards. By pulling back on this, it's not saying that alignment is gone, that nobody is good and nobody is evil and you're going to have a lawful good beholder. It's really just trying to give that sort of flexibility to players and DMs to be able to have some sort of meaningful changes or advancements in their game. One of the examples used in the rules clarifier is particularly looking at devils and how devils aren't choosing to be lawful evil, but rather devils are inherently lawful evil by virtue of their existence within the 9 hells. And that's to say that that is their sort of, that is core to their being. That is part of their fundamental existence. And any change to that, to a devil no longer kind of following that hierarchical society that exists within the nine hells, that would be a dramatic change. So it's not that, again, it's not that the devil is choosing to be lawful evil. They just kind of are. And if they were to change that alignment in some way, that would be a pretty significant change. And to quote them, they even say that would be something worthy of legend. All right, so moving on for alignment, we're going to get into a couple more small things, which may actually have a little bit more of a mechanical impact onto your game. So finally, we get official clarification that ammunition from a magic weapon is now considered magic for the purpose of overcoming resistance, which is great. It also just makes totally logical sense. You're firing a bullet from a magical gun or from a magical bow. That ammunition itself is also magical. This has kind of been assumed for a long time. It might even have been printed somewhere, but the fact that it's making its way officially into the core rulebooks is a great addition. Another example is looking at combining game effects, and in particular, ones that have the same name. So they use the particular example of a fire elemental's fire form, which essentially says that when it enters into a space of a hostile creature, that creature now is burning and takes 1d10 fire damage. If this were to happen twice to a creature, because the effects have the same name, the effects don't actually happen twice. As long as they're overlapping, they only take the effect of the more potent one, and in this case, they would be the same, so only one of them would take effect at a time. If one of the elementals leave and the other one stays there, then yes, the second effect would then take over, but you're not stacking that damage on top of each other when they are the same effect applying. Only the more potent one will take effect at any given time. There's also been a small wording change, which I do think is pretty good, especially going forward for what we know that they're trying to do with the game. So in a lot of places, the wording of non-magical weapons has been changed to non-magical attacks. And this really does seem to be in line with the more streamlined stat blocks that we know that they're trying to create moving forward. And we've already seen in some adventures like Wild Beyond the Witchlight and in Curriculum of Chaos and Fizzbands, we've seen some stat blocks that are starting to change to reflect the adjustments that they're going to be making. And I think this really makes sense. The reason they're changing them to non-magical attacks is that because now we are going to be seeing things like a lot more spell attacks under the attack sort of section of an enemy stat block. So it really just kind of makes it a lot more clear that these magical attacks are much more obviously differentiated from spells proper. Lastly, we got a couple adjustments to some spell wording. Most notably, I think we got Contagion probably got its 50th update, and I think it's finally the most clear that it ever has been. For the first time, I really do feel like it's very obvious when the saving throws take place, when the secondary effect actually happens, what is the effect of the poison before the disease takes effect. I really feel like they finally nailed the effect of Contagion, and I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. Next up is Disintegrate, and while it's not really a fundamental change to the way the spell works, it's really just an important clarification, because changing the wording to say if it leaves the creature with 0 hit points, then it's disintegrated is a really, really big deal, because there's always kind of been the looming question of, if you have some kind of effect that pops you back up to 1 hit point, but you hit 0, are you disintegrated? So it's really just a nice clarification. I know a lot of people have kind of used sort of this rule anyway, but it's good again, once again, just to have it in the rule books officially. Phantasmal Killer, just having the saving throw moved from the beginning to the end of the turn is a pretty big deal and definitely makes the spell a lot more potent. Last up, the spells that I wanted to mention is Acid Splash. Adjusting the creatures that you can hit from any creature within range to a creature that you can see just logically makes a lot more sense. You are hurling acid in some capacity at this creature, so as long as they were within 60 feet, whether or not you could see them if they were behind corners didn't matter as long as they were within range as written. So the fact that it's now that you can see, I think, is a big adjustment. And again, really just kind of signifies that clarity and that sort of guiding light that they're having going forward with a lot of the spell wording that we're going to be seeing in coming editions. All right, everyone, so that is it. That's been a quick review of some of the errata drama that's been going on over the last couple of days, and a quick look at some of the more meaningful additions and adjustments that actually happen as a result of the errata. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do like this type of content and you want to support me, like I said, please do leave a sub to the channel. It really does mean a lot and it helps me significantly. But other than that, take care.